Boa tarde a tudo. Eu vou começar a tentar falar um pouco em português, se puder. Só para agradecer vocês para me deixar falar em inglês esta tarde. Eu estou aprendendo a sua língua, mas está difícil, né? É muito difícil, todos aqueles verbos. So I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to speak in English today. It's a great pleasure to be here at blastU. And I also want to say thank you to our translators at the back who are helping me speak in English. My name is David Baker, and I'm a teacher at the School of Life, both here in São Paulo and in London. And I'm also one of the founders of the UK edition of a magazine called Wired, which some of you may know. It's about science and technology. I was the managing editor there. And it's at the intersection of these two activities that I think really interesting things happen. The School of Life, we try to look at questions about how to live better, ideas of philosophy, of psychology, of our feelings as human beings. At Wired, we look at the practical world of science and technology and so much of what's going on here at this conference. And as I say, it's where these two meet that the most interesting things are happening. And this is especially important when it comes to work. I want to start, if I may, with a story. Last year, I was working with a company in Britain, and something very interesting happened. Everyone was working, and the boss of the company, the CEO, came out of his office and said, "Attention everyone, pay attention. I have made a mistake, and I need your help to put it right." And it was a really electrifying moment. This man had come out, the senior guy, the boss of the company, had come out and said, "I've made a mistake." And the effect was incredible. It energized his team completely. They stopped what they were doing, they gathered round, they said, "Tell us about it." They sorted the problem, they divided into small groups to work out different ways of approaching what had happened, and the problem was solved. And that team was energized by his admission, by what he said. And it's very interesting to wonder how often or how seldom do we hear bosses in corporate life saying something like this: "I've made a mistake, can you help me?" And in fact, that team, that company now is still energized by this. The staff had new respect for him. They also felt able to say, "I've made a mistake as well, can you help me?" And the team collaborates now in an amazing way, all because of a simple admission of error. And the reason I wanted to tell you this story is because for me, this is a really good example of what we call emotional intelligence in action. Imagine what that man needed to prepare himself to say that to his staff. The courage, the humility, the insight, the risk-taking that he needed to do to say that. Think just for a moment how few of us do that. We've made a mistake, now we try to keep it silent. Maybe we try and work by ourselves to correct the mistake and don't ask for help. Maybe we're embarrassed about what people might think about us. His simple admission drove that company into new places and bonded the team together. And this is what I want to look at today, this idea of emotional intelligence. Now, before I go on, I need to say that we've kind of been here before. When I started working in the last century, there was a sense of hard and soft skills in business. Hard skills were things like using a spreadsheet, negotiation, budgeting. These were about the practical aspects of work. And the soft skills were things like listening, relations, creativity. And they're fine for a bit, but as soon as the money disappears, those soft skills are eliminated from the world of work. We think somehow work is about industry and practicality. And I want to show you some work we're doing at the School of Life, which is trying to resurrect this idea of those skills and why they're not soft. That actually this is the time for emotional intelligence. And I want to show you with some examples about how powerful this insight can be. So, what is emotional intelligence? Well, at its very core, it's an idea that we become more self-aware. We begin to understand ourselves better as human beings. What affects me? What makes me feel in such and such a way? How do I behave when, for example, I'm anxious, or I'm excited, or I'm nervous, or I'm frightened, or I'm panicking? What happens inside my body and my mind? And how does that affect the decisions I make and the relations I have with other people? At the School of Life, we like to say there are no rules for the school, but there is, if you like, a principle. And that principle would be a question. Am I living my life in the way I want to be living it, or the life that other people want me to live? Am I living the life that I want to live, or the life that other people want me to live? Now, those of you who know your Greek philosophy will know this is Socrates, the father of philosophy, who said we need to examine ourselves. We need to look inside ourselves and say, what influences me? What drives me? What makes me go forward with my ambition and my dreams? What motivates me? And discover more about ourselves as individuals. And if you like, this question is an amazing tool for us to look at all our life, including work. Am I doing the work that I want to be doing, or the work that other people want me to do? And when we start asking this question about work, we can discover that actually there's a huge amount of influence in the world of work, which perhaps is quite silent to us or invisible to us. It comes from the culture, the expectation of the society we live in, the norms of that society, and it comes also from our families. So I want to just share with you today some few things that we do to explore emotional intelligence. And the first one I've brought along is this idea of family scripts. All of us, when we think about the work we do, how we work, what jobs we apply for, what things interest us, are influenced by the family we grew up in. All families have ideas and views and experience about work. When we're children in those families, we hear those views, we hear those opinions, and we tend to absorb them. And it's worth thinking about what messages from my family do I still feel now, even though I'm now adult and independent, and maybe I'm still acting on. I brought along a little exercise. You might want to do this on a piece of paper or in your head. It's an exercise we use at the school because it's an opportunity to do a little audit in the kind of influences that our family has over us. All families have jobs with which they're very familiar. It's the jobs maybe our parents do, or people we know, friends of our parents, relations, other adults. And as children, we get very familiar with those jobs. There are some families, for example, where everyone is a doctor. So when people come home in the evening, we're having dinner, everybody understands what it means to be a doctor. We hear stories from the hospital. We hear stories about patients or colleagues. We become very familiar with this world. And so it's easy for us to imagine ourselves being a doctor. And similarly, we have jobs which our family literally has no clue about. We know no one who does this kind of job. We can't imagine doing this kind of job. And as a result, we tend to close off those options from the ones we choose. So a kind of audit might look like something like this, just simply two lists. In my family, we kind of understood these jobs. These were the jobs that were familiar to me when I was growing up. And we didn't understand these jobs at all. And doing this little audit might start helping us reflect on the job choices we make nowadays in adult life. Have I limited my choice because really I've kept myself on the left-hand side of this chart rather than the right? This is the influence that is invisible to us but still present in our heads. But it goes deeper too. Our families also had opinions about jobs, even if they weren't jobs that we ourselves did or we knew anyone doing. Many families really rated jobs. My own family, my father was a shopkeeper, and he reckoned a lawyer was the best job in the world. And in my family, I grew up with this idea that being a lawyer was the top ambition. So now we have a second list. We have my family liked these kind of jobs, and my family also had certain jobs which were beneath us or not for us, or no one in our family does this kind of work. And again, we can make two lists, a kind of audit of the family influences, and ask ourselves, not really about then, about our family, but about now. Am I still living, am I still working under these influences that I picked up when I was a child? And do I want to do something about it? This is emotional intelligence in action. It's looking not at the practicalities of the job market, what jobs are here, what money they pay, what status they give you, but about attitudes and feelings about jobs. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, we might discover that those influences are just as powerful as the worldly influences that we usually take into account with employment. This might apply here at blastU hugely. Many of us here, for example, may well be working for ourselves, or thinking of working for ourselves, or thinking of becoming entrepreneurial, maybe within a startup. What attitudes does my family have about an entrepreneurial career? And am I finding resistance inside myself from those attitudes? A second area of emotional intelligence I wanted to just share with you is understanding how we think. Emotional intelligence is hugely tied up with psychology, but also with psychoanalysis, with meditation, with counseling, with coaching, with these activities which help us understand the processes that go on in our heads. We tend to think, even if we don't really believe it, that the brain is kind of like a computer, that data goes in, there's some sort of algorithm, and information comes out. And especially now in our technology world, we celebrate this model a huge amount. But in fact, the brain is far more messy than this. And we've made a mistake in the world of work, ignoring the uncomfortable, messy sides of our brain. And a psychologist who's particularly interested in this is a guy called Martin Seligman. He's an American psychologist. He's a very senior psychologist in the United States. And he was very interested in ideas such as optimism, pessimism. These seem to be, again, those soft things, those emotional things that we don't really think about in the world of work. And yet, when we think about it, we think in those ways all our time. And I want to show you an idea he had about optimism and pessimism. We usually see it as some way of looking into the future. I'm optimistic that tomorrow will be a wonderful day. I'm very pessimistic about that meeting on Friday. But instead, Seligman said that instead, it's an idea about how we look into the past. And how we look into the past in a very particular situation. He wanted us to imagine that something has gone wrong, either in our personal life or at work. Maybe we've had a terrible meeting with a client, maybe a presentation has gone wrong, something has gone wrong. And he said there's a moment, sometime after that event, when we kind of do a review of what happened. We have a bad client meeting and now we go back to our desk and it's like, oh my goodness me, what happened there? And at that point, we have a kind of commentary in our head. We say to ourselves, almost literally with voices inside our head, a kind of explanation about what went wrong. And Seligman was very interested in looking at the language of that explanation. What he had to say was this language can divide into pessimistic and optimistic language, and that our job is to catch the language we're using and make it more optimistic. Let me show you what he means. For him, the pessimistic voice says that a setback or a problem is permanent. So for example, I had that meeting with my client, it went horribly wrong. I come back to my desk and I say something like, "Oh, I always mess up with that client." And we tend to say things like this to ourselves. Seligman would say an optimistic point of view would be to say something like, "I messed up with that client on Thursday." And we've made it a temporary event. And as soon as we add "on Thursday," a kind of little door opens that allows us to say, okay, next Thursday, if I do something different, I won't mess up. Permanent to temporary. Similarly, the pessimistic voice inside us is kind of pervasive or universal. You maybe go to one of those networking events that are more and more common in our world. And let's face it, not all of us are good at these events. Sometimes they're a horror. And you stand there all by yourself, nobody speaks to you, you don't speak to anyone else, you have that glass of horrible wine, and eventually you just sort of slip away, and no one's even noticed you've gone. And now you're back home, and you go, oh my goodness, I'm hopeless at networking events. I'm never going to go again, and everything. And that's a kind of universal diagnosis of networking events. But actually, Seligman would say something like, I'm hopeless at networking events when I don't know anyone there. And it opens a little door to saying, okay, next time if I get an invitation, I'm going to insist that I go with a colleague. And this will open the opportunity for me to be more sociable, to be more interactive, because I've discovered something about myself that I'm shy. And shyness is fine, but here with a colleague, I can overcome my shyness. And similarly, he had an idea about how we apportion blame. He wanted us to look, if you like, at how blame gets attached to things in our head. He wanted us to say, for example, that when something goes really wrong, in the pessimistic point of view, we tend to allocate blame in a kind of 100% way. We tend to say something like, it's all my fault. Or, if we're in a kind of aggressive mood, it's all their fault. We sort of put 100% in place. And Seligman said that the pessimistic point of view allocates blame like this, but the optimistic point of view can stand back and do a little apportioning of blame. So for example, we might have something like I do a presentation to the sales team, and it's a disaster. Everything in it goes wrong. Now I'm back at my desk. I'm going through the review. And I'll probably go something like, if I'm pessimistic, it's all my fault. What a disaster. An optimistic point of view might say something like, well, I could have prepared the slides better, made them look better, but also it was just after lunch and everyone was very sleepy. And now we've got a kind of more mature allocation of what happened. And for Seligman, what he's saying here is that this is a good way for us to deal, not particularly with setbacks, but to develop a resilience for dealing with things in the future. Because each of those things opens a door for me to have a better client meeting, a better networking event, a better presentation next time. And that actually will mean that those meetings, those events, those presentations are better, because we've taught ourselves something about ourselves and how we can do it differently next time. And of course, it unleashes this unbelievable energy inside us, which is to take risks. If I'm on the pessimistic side of things, I'm not going to take risks. I'm not going to go to another client meeting. I'm not going to risk a presentation. If I'm on the optimistic side, I'm going to risk failure, because I know that failure in the end will be fine. I'll talk it through with my optimistic voice. And all he's suggesting we do here is change language. What he says is, catch yourself when you're reviewing what went wrong. Look out for words like always or never. Look out for how you give 100% of the blame here or there. Look out for how you have a generalization, I'm hopeless at networking events, and cross them out from your language. What he actually suggests is starting to do this by writing it down. This is a vague thing we do in our head, but it's a concrete thing if we do it on paper. And he literally says, sit down, write out what went wrong, then look at your language and see what you can change from that language. It works in practice. To begin with, it's strange. Like learning any new language, we fall back on the old ways we have of speaking. But gradually we'll find that the way we review gets more and more mature, more and more optimistic, and opens all those doors to change. It's very useful, by the way, also to do in meetings. If we have a review meeting about what happened, to catch ourselves using this language. This language in our head is very much part of our emotional intelligence, because it says to us things like, I'm frightened, I'm going to mess up, I'm very worried about tomorrow. These are the languages we use in our head to describe our emotions, and they have direct effects on how we interrelate with people. Seligman is saying, change the language, and through practice, we can do this. The third part of emotional intelligence I've brought along is about how we relate to people, or even beyond that, to the world, and beyond that, to ourselves. In business, we're kind of used to doing a lot of stuff about relationships, but we tend to keep them in a box. For example, we're very keen to investigate relationships with clients. We often have courses called Building Client Relationships, something like that. But we tend to see that relationship as quite mechanical. So long as that relationship can be good, their money is coming into our company, we're happy. I want to go deeper to this, that actually the whole world, our entire life, including work, is about relationships. It's very seldom that we're completely on our own and not even thinking about any other person. And in fact, this web of relationships is incredibly complex. But because it involves things like love or hate or envy, these are kind of problematic words for us to deal with in the workplace, so we tend to walk away from them. And a guy who's been very interested in this is an English poet who's a kind of poet-philosopher who now lives in the United States called David Whyte. And he has a model I'd like to share with you. This is a model we use at the school a lot. He wants us to imagine that we're married to 3 people simultaneously. And he calls them this. He calls them, we're married to our world of work, we're married to our world of other people. That might be our romantic relationship, our friends, our colleagues, the wider world around us. And we're married to me, myself. And he says these are 3 relationships which we need to pay attention to. And what he asks us to do is to say, here, as you can see here on the slide, there are 6 possible conversations that could take place in this strange marriage that we have. 3 between me and each of my partners, and 3 between them if maybe they met at a party, for example, or behind our back. And what he actually asks us to say is try and imagine what would those conversations be like? Which ones would be friendly? Which ones would have complaints in them? Which ones would be totally silent? What would one of our partners say to the other? Would they say something like, you're really lucky, you get all the attention. He never talks to me, for example. And he's asking us to look at these conversations, and in particular to reflect on, would I like to do something different? And in particular, if we think about these relationships in our lives, we often find that one of these often gets neglected. The relationship for many people between me and myself, for example, tends to get downgraded. I'll work late at the office rather than going to see that movie I wanted to see. I'll stay late up rather than getting some good sleep because I need to finish that spreadsheet. This kind of stuff goes on all the time in the way we run our lives, and this is the emotional part of our lives. It's not about time management, it's about respect, attention, and love. This is why he chose the model of partners. And this is a really beautiful model for us to do an audit on, is my energy, is my love, is my attention going in the right direction? And if not, do I want to do something about it? Now, what a chart like this shows is often we need to do something first before giving more love or more attention to another part of our life. It's all well and good saying, you know what, I'm working a lot, and as a result, I never see my friends. But if I want to see my friends more, then I have to work less. This is not a kind of infinite sum equation. And maybe the wisdom here, and this is what David Whyte likes to say, is that before we can make a change that's positive in our lives, paying more attention to certain aspects of our life, we need to reduce our attention and the energy we give to another aspect. So for example, if our partner is complaining that we're working too much and not having anything to say to them, and we want to change that, we're going to have to reduce our attention to work to improve our attention to them. The culture, and remember we started with, am I living the life I want to be living, or the life other people, the culture, wants me to live? The culture tells us we can have it all. Just improve your love life, improve your work life, get fit, be beautiful, have the best clothes. And in fact, the consumer culture tells us a lie here. And the real wisdom of an emotional intelligence like this is to say, you know what, I have limited energy, I have limited time, can I rearrange it around the place? We also, and of course, because I work for Wired, I wanted to bring this along, have an emotional relationship with technology. And this is one that we probably keep very hidden from ourselves and from other people. But it's one that arises when, for example, we leave our phone at home and arrive at work. That feeling of anxiety, of loss, that feeling of panic. It arises, for example, when we send someone a message and, you know, on WhatsApp you can see the two little ticks, but they haven't replied. It arises, for example, when we worry about not checking our email because we haven't seen it for 20 minutes. All of this is our relationship with technology, and it's not a practical relationship. It's not really about phones, WhatsApp, or email. It's something about our feelings towards this thing we have in our pocket, our phones. And emotional intelligence can help us do a David Whyte here. Have I maybe even got a fourth partner now in my marriage, which seems to dominate everything else? And do I want to do about this? What do I want to do about this? These three aspects of emotional intelligence are just the beginning. Self-awareness, who am I? What makes me motivated? What do I want to do? What's my purpose here on earth? What work do I want to do towards that purpose? Ways of thinking. How do I think in different situations? What happens, as we saw, when something's gone wrong? What happens, for example, when I'm very excited? What happens when I'm nervous about something? How do the thoughts process in my head, and how does that affect my decision making? Relationships, not only with real people, but with the world, with ourselves, our internal relationships, and with our technology. How can I adjust that? How can I make them more healthy? And this is why emotional intelligence is so powerful, because it's by thinking of these things that we don't usually think about in work at all, that we can actually make ourselves better decision makers and better collaborators within the workplace. And this is just the beginning. Here are a few more. These are ones that come from Martin Seligman. They're all good things that human beings can have, but almost all of them are really to do with emotion rather than with the practicality of work. And this is why I think right now we've got an opportunity to build on these things. For a long time, work was seen as nothing useful, certainly not pleasurable. And certainly since the Industrial Revolution, we've had a situation where work kind of looks a bit like this. This is Charlie Chaplin in this famous film that he made about industrialization. How many of us sometimes, often, always feel like this in work? Now, this is a disgrace. This is a scandal. We are intelligent enough to understand that this is not the way for human beings to exist. And yet, we've created, certainly in our capitalist, modern industrial society, a world in which millions of workers, and I include many of us here, often feel like this. This has come from a tradition of seeing work as somehow mechanistic, that we are machines or parts of machines. And so much of our time, especially in big organizations, can feel like this: soulless, depressing, tiring, without purpose, without point. We have an opportunity now, and I mean now in about 2017, to turn this around, to make a revolution. And the reason for that is work will change from this to this. We are developing technology and robots and algorithms to take away much of that mechanical work. They are really good at this. It's repetitive, it's analytical, it's boring. And robots and algorithms and computers love things which are repetitive, boring, and analytical. And instead, we can start saying the massive tool we have in work is not the spreadsheet, is not the system, is not the pie chart, the flow chart, or whatever. It's our brains. And emotional intelligence is a part of our brain that we have not yet explored. I want to resurrect the idea even of things like love and envy and anxiety and excitement as tools in the workplace. Because, as the boss that I told you about last year showed, when he discovered courage, humility, self-awareness, he revved up his team in an incredible way. This is a whole hidden source of tools in the workplace. It's a project of building emotional intelligence and adding them on to the skills that we already have in the workplace. I can tell you from working on both sides of the equation, it's really thrilling, but much more important, it's actually very pleasurable. Because at last in the workplace, we're starting to see ourselves as humans with feelings rather than as machines just for processing tasks. It's going to be a wonderful project, and I invite you to join us on it. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think now I need to put my headphones on for questions. Just give me one sec. Okay, I think I can hear.
Muito prazer. Muito prazer. Meu nome é Alberto Veloso. Eu sou dono de uma produtora de conteúdo.
Eu não ouço nada. Sorry, one moment. I need to hear the English.
Meu nome é Alberto Veloso.
Espera. Now I can hear. Okay, thank you, please.
Prazer. Meu nome é Alberto Veloso. Eu sou dono de uma produtora de conteúdo, filmes, livros e audiolivros. Hoje mudei o estilo de vida. Vivia num escritório até os 30, 40. Hoje ando de bicicleta, trabalho em museus, network, caminho todos os dias pela manhã no parque. E percebi que para você alcançar os objetivos, não precisa trabalhar 30 horas por dia. Às vezes 3, 4. E tendo tempo para você, para os amigos e para a sociedade. Às vezes ligo para os amigos, vamos a um cinema? Não tenho tempo. Vamos marcar na livraria às 6 da tarde? Não tenho tempo. E quando vão, ficam olhando para o relógio o tempo todo. Ou o telefone celular. Esse mundo está louco. As pessoas não vão vencer pela tecnologia, ou pelo quanto tem no banco, ou quanto vão acumular. Porque todos vamos morrer. Hoje, amanhã, daqui a 10 anos. Enquanto está vivendo, você tem que ter um objetivo simples. Viver a vida, ter um projeto para ajudar a sociedade Eu, quando lanço um livro ou um filme, além do dinheiro, me sinto feliz, porque estou levando um produto que muda a sociedade, sem pagar propina,
Very nice.
sem leis de incentivo do Estado, sem aceitar privilégios de um ou de outro. E eu gostaria de saber a sua opinião sobre isso.
Well, I think congratulations. I want to say congratulations that the thing you've said, which is the thing. One moment. Can you hear me? Yeah. The thing you've said is so important about where is our purpose in life. That you've made a decision to. Thank you. I want to take this off. Thank you. Okay. What you said is very interesting because, first of all, you made a change which was guided by a purpose. And in a way, in the world of work, we often don't really understand what our purpose is. We kind of think, well, I need to go to work to get the money. And then we never think beyond this. And actually, perhaps thinking of a longer term goal is a way to say, am I really doing the right thing now? I like to be a little bit morbid about this. And I like to say that, as this gentleman says, we are all going to die. It's the only certain thing that links all of us in this room. And sadly, we may die tomorrow. And if, God forbid, that happens, will we, in our last moments of life, look back on the life we're living now and say, this is the life for me? This is a philosophical, emotional question. It's a question which fills us with fear, but by confronting that fear, I think we discover something very useful. And what you said about technology is interesting. In 1930, a British economist called John Maynard Keynes said that in 100 years, so we're almost there, he meant 2030, we will be all working 15 hours per week because of technology. Now, technology has improved so much more than he could possibly ever imagined. And yet there are many of us here who are working 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week. And this is because we've detached ourselves from our general purpose in life, our emotional connection to life, and felt that somehow work is the thing we need to do more. Thank you for your observation. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any comments or questions?
Gostaria de continuar. Realmente, a aflição que as pessoas sentem nas empresas, das 7 às 9 da noite. O outro dia, um grande sociólogo italiano, Domenico De Masi, comentou que os homens, sabe por que os homens chegam tarde em casa? Para não encontrar suas mulheres acordadas. Porque é mais problemas para eles. Então as pessoas precisam melhorar sua qualidade de vida. Tem tempo para ir para a praia.
Let me answer this. Okay. This is very interesting, this moment where a person gets home from work. A man, a wife, a husband, whatever. Because that's often a time of problematic situation. And one of the reasons for that is because we have the misfortune now in 2017 to live under the influence of two huge movements. I think Damasio is probably talking about this. And he said that one of them is, if you like, the idea of modernism. The idea that we should give ourselves 100% to work. This is the modernism created the idea of work as machinery, as something that produces. We have these words productivity, efficiency. We are seen as mechanisms inside machinery. And we are often encouraged to give ourselves totally to that work. And often people in work say, she's really good. She gives herself 110% to the office, to the work. And at the same time, we live under the influence of romanticism. When it comes to our love lives, our lives of emotion and desire, we live in a world that was created by a group of people called the Romantics, who came to power, if you like, or certainly came to influence in the late 18th, early 19th, mid-19th century. And we here in Brazil are under the power of both these movements. And Romantics said something very new about love, about family, about marriage. Before the Romantics, marriage was a very different thing. It was a kind of commercial transaction. I will marry you to bring together these two pieces of land. We will get together because this money and this business will be a good combination. And yes, we'll have children to take on this combination we've made into future generations. But the idea that a husband and wife would love each other was quite unusual. One of the interesting things about Romeo and Juliet for people who saw the play at the time was not that their love was tragic, but that actually they were in love at all. It was much more logical for two families who didn't like each other not to make an alliance. Nowadays, we have the opposite. We have the idea that love should demand from us 100% of our energy, of our time, that I should meet someone and spend all my time looking into their eyes, agreeing with everything they say, doing so many things together as much as possible. And so what we have here is two movements which are asking us to give 100% of our energy and time to each of them. 100% to work, 100% to love. And now we have 200% which are going together. And we can see this going wrong when someone comes home from work and their partner says, you're late again, you're not interested in my day or what I did, and they have an argument. This is not a human failing. This is simply a misfortune we have to live in a time where modernism and romanticism are both celebrated movements. So we need finally to ask ourselves, am I living the life I want to be living or the life that other people want me to live? Maybe we need to say, do I really want to live the life that modernists or romanticists or both want me to live? Is there a way, like this gentleman has done, to revise our life, to do small changes in it and discover a new way of making our lives fulfilling? I think we have 2 minutes. A question? Yeah, please. 1 sec. In English or Portuguese?
Yeah, I can ask in English. I just want your advice.
I never give advice.
to all of us. You're talking about living our dreams and following a purpose. And this all sounds very glamorous and exciting, but I'm sure that all of us here knows that it's very tough and it takes a lot of resilience and persistence. And the fact that we will always have people around us saying, you're crazy, give up. You're never gonna be able to do this. So what's your advice when we face this kind of people?
You know what, we don't live in the world of Walt Disney. Even though the culture tries to encourage us through dramas and rom-coms and animations that we should live your dream and you will achieve. This is a terrible message for us to receive because most people don't achieve their dream. And this is a reality of the world. But many of us probably have our dream in the wrong place. We probably haven't thought about our real dream. That actually we may imagine that our dream is some wonderful thing up here. I will change the world. I will be on the cover of a magazine. I will make a hit record, whatever it might be. And the culture encourages us to have these dreams because it really celebrates people who achieve those things. But if you look at the statistics, those people are 0.00001% of us. Instead, and this is what David White is asking us to do, we need to see, how do my dreams fit into this matrix of work, other people, myself? What does it mean for me to be important to me? And actually, if it's helpful, I want to leave us with a small exercise which somebody asked me at a wedding in Paris. And actually there's a TED talk about this. The challenge is that we probably spend a lot of our time, can you hear me? Yeah. We probably spend a lot of our time working towards our CV, our curriculum vitae, resume. And the argument of this person was that instead we should spend more time working towards what in English is called a eulogy. Eu não sei a palavra para isso em português, desculpe, mas it's a speech which people give at our funeral over our body. So we want to imagine that we are dead and we're here in the coffin and all our friends are here and someone is making a speech about our life. And the question is, what would we want them to say? And the truth is, we probably wouldn't want them to say, she always worked late at the office and produced beautiful PowerPoint presentations. Even though we do spend a huge amount of our time and energy working late at the office, producing beautiful PowerPoint presentations or spreadsheets or whatever. Instead, we'd probably want them to say something like, she was really wonderful company and treated people with respect, or something like this. And so the exercise is for us to look inside ourselves and say, and the exercise we do at the school is, can you say in 10 words what you would like that person to say? And then maybe that's our dream. And if we have this dream which is authentic to us, then it doesn't matter if other people don't agree with it, or other people criticize us, or other people tease us, because we know this dream has come from in here rather than from outside. Am I living the dream that I want to be living, or the dream that other people are telling me to live? Thank you, a very good question. We need to finish, but thank you very much indeed. Thank you.